Not yet. Now.
Okay. I gave a handout to you all, and what this is, last week, we talked a lot about Tecumseh and William Henry Harrison, and last week, the Battle of Tippecanoe, was over, which the Americans won, William Henry Harrison. But what I've showed you here is a cedar slab that Tecumseh took around. He made 50 of these. He sent 25 out by warriors, by courier, and 25 himself. And on the left-hand side is what the white man or anyone else was supposed to know. But what he was doing is uniting all the tribes that wanted to go to war against the Americans and push them back across the mountains. And he really truly believed he could do this. And his sign was going to be, he gave them all this slab and a bundle of cedar sticks. He told them, every moon, throw one away. When you get down to the last one, you start cutting it in about 1-inch pieces, or about the length between your knuckle, and burning that. When you burn that last piece, you start watching the sky. He was born under the sign of the panther. A meteor, not a comet, struck across the sky. He says, when the panther, the sign of the panther, comes across the sky, you wait for my signal. I'm going to stomp my foot against the ground. The mighty river, the Spaley-Withipi, which was the Ohio, and the Mississippi, will open up. It will run backwards. What is dry ground will become wet, and what is wet will become dry. That will be all my signal for you to come north. Now this slab is read from the bottom to the top. This was, it's a totem, really. They call it a sacred slab. And as you can see from the bottom, all Indians on both sides of the great river, straight direction, at the speed of lightning, you bring your weapons from the four corners of the earth. You stop tending your corn, hunting the game, and storing your ground. You unite, and when that great sign, the trembling earth, all tribes in one movement come to the place of the white man. And they were supposed to be coming to Tippecanoe. Now his brother, who went by the prophet, the sign of prophet, was not the true prophet. Tecumseh was. Well, he got too big for his britches, and if you all remember, when I started this, I told you I found a statement researching this that said greed will overcome common sense. Well, greed doesn't just have to be about money. Power is probably what people obsess more than money. And his brother got power hungry. And he told the warriors there at Tippecanoe, I'm going to put a spell on William Henry Harrison's army. And they will be crazy. They will not be able to get up. Their bullets will pass through you, and their bayonets will not hurt you. Well, that wasn't true. So they attacked Harrison's army, and Tecumseh made them swear that they would not pick the hatchet up against the white man until he came back, delivering these sacred slabs. Now, some people say there's no way that Tecumseh knew how to predict this earthquake, but he talked about this earthquake in 1801. And if he didn't know what he was doing, why was he at New Madrid? That's where he was when he stomped his foot against the ground. You know, I've been there. You know, that's how Reelfoot Lake came about. Now, after Tippecanoe was destroyed, it took his warriors 38 days to find him. And that's where they found him, was at New Madrid. You know, because they told him the Panthers already crossed the sky. He said, well, it's time for me to give the signal. And he did. It was at 12:15 a.m. It was an 8.0 on the Richter scale. And they had shocks for 2 days afterwards. Now, he goes back. He wants to know, where's the prophet? Where's my brother? They said, we had him. We didn't kill him. We wanted to wait and let you do it. So he goes in, and they got him tied up, and Tecumseh goes in, and he pulls his knife out, he grabs him by the hair of the head, and he sticks his knife on his jugular vein. And he tells, he relents, he cuts the bonds that they bound him, but he grabs him by the hair of the head. And he shakes him so hard, till his nose bleeds, and he throws him down. And he says, I will not kill you. I'm going to let you die a day at a time. You don't deserve to die. And the prophet's busted. He's banished in scorn. But later on, Tecumseh allows him to come back. And which is very, very rare to do. But he's still the low man on the totem pole. No one has any respect. They tolerate him just because he's Tecumseh's brother. Now, at this time, the War of 1812 is officially declared between the British and the Americans. So they send a man by the name of William Hull to raise an army of 1,200 men. He is to assemble them at Urbana, Ohio, and cut a road 175 miles to Detroit and cow the Indians all along the way, because they think now that Tippecanoe's over. We've destroyed Tecumseh's village. The Indians are no longer a threat, and they are very, very much far from wrong. They underestimate Tecumseh. In my view, I've studied him extensively. He is one of the greatest warriors. Had he been in the white man's, he'd have been a 10-star general, you know. I mean, he would have been at the top of the food chain. He, not only being a visionary and able to peer into the future, but he was just a strategist, and he was just brave. He just defied all odds. So he's supposed to cow these Indians on the way. Henry Clay, our Henry Clay, Kentucky's Henry Clay, is a war hawk, and he's yipping. We got to teach the British a lesson. He wants Canada. But right now, the British control Lake Erie. They control Detroit. Does anyone know what Detroit means? It's French for straight. The French came in and built Detroit. The English took it away from them. We took it away from the English. The British took it back. So Detroit has bounced back and forth. But if you understand, and some people don't, it was hard for me to get my children sometimes when I was teaching social studies to understand that all water, when they look at a page on the book, they all thought that the water run to the bottom of the page. And, you know, water runs downhill, not south. You know, and a prime example is our Kentucky River. It runs northwest. So the Great Lakes actually run part of it south, and they turn and run east. But coming out of Lake Michigan, you have Detroit. And you have the Detroit River that runs down into Lake Erie. So ever who controls that area. And you have the Maumee River, which runs north into Lake Erie, which is able to handle the ship part of the way. There's some rapids there that are an obstacle. But right now the British control this. But what they failed to do is to tell General Hull that war has been declared. You know, they send him out on this mission to go take control, cut a road 175 miles, but they don't tell him that we're at war with the British. Thomas Jefferson, who was our president, said, we shall strip Great Britain of all of her possessions on this continent. Now, Hull is 58 years old. Again, he's overweight. He likes to drink too much. He has 2,200 men. He is very much qualified for the territorial governor of Michigan, but he's not qualified to be a general. He was in the American Revolution, but he does not understand the militia. And it's a comedy of errors when this thing starts out. It talks about how all the upper echelon of our military and our government are dining in plush environments. And then one of them looks across at the other at one of these dinners in Chicago or somewhere, or in New York. It says, have we informed General Hull that we're at war with the bridge? And they, no, I didn't tell him, and then when they go around the circle, they realize that they sent this man off to war. And he doesn't know it. He don't know that I mean, it's typical in a sense. So he makes his aide de camp, which is supposed to be a very prestigious position, his son, who is drunk more than he is. So it's literally like the Keystone Cops are getting ready to go to war here. He starts marching, he's cutting the road, and he gets up near Lake Erie. And they go down the Maumee River, and there is a sloop called the Cayuga that is for hire, a ship. So he decides to hire this ship to take all his excess baggage. He has a band with him, an orchestra, and some of the officers' wives are with him. I mean, this is pomp and circumstance. I mean, there are feathers in their hats, and they're giving speeches along the way. It's like they're out for a parade. So his son loads all the excess baggage. He's sober this day. He does a good, efficient job of loading everything. And they even put the musical instruments on board and the orchestra. And so you all, and put some of the wives on board. But not only did he do that, he packed in the general's trunk all of his papers, orders, notes, correspondence, accounts, field reports, and also included up-to-date muster rolls for the whole army. Well, at this point, an officer comes up and says, maybe we shouldn't do this, because that ship's got to sail up the Detroit River, and the British control it right now. They're talking declaring war at any time. Well, war's already been declared. So he laughs and says, if war had been declared, I would definitely have been notified. At this time, 20 miles away on a horse that's almost dead is a young lawyer. And I even included their names in there because it was his name was Charles Slater, and he's riding as hard as he can to inform General Hull that we're at war. So he finally rides into the camp, and he tells him, General, we're at war. And he says, we need to send a boat and see if we can find it, cut that ship off before he gets there. Well, not far away, up around the bend, sits a British ship. And it sails out to meet the Coyote. They think it's a welcoming party. The captain of the Union, the ship, flying an American flag up the waters in British territory, comes out in within minutes. The Union Jack is flying over the Coyote. So not only does he have the orchestra and the musical instrument, he has all the records of General Hull, which is scary. The British general has the band play God Save the King all the way in to Fort Dearborn, which we're familiar with because that's where Carhart's is, and Fort Detroit is right there. Now, this ship shows up flying the British colors with American soldiers and civilians aboard, announcing the surrender of Fort Mackinac, which was held by the Americans. They thought Hull was going to faint when he comes in, because he understands that now Tecumseh is on his way with 1,000 Indians. But he still has them outnumbered. He has 2,200 men, and there's only 150 British in Fort Detroit. So they get there, and the entire frontier from Chicago, the Indians have overtaken it, and they're massacred. And that's what terrifies Hull the most, because he understands that he stands a very, very possibility of being scalped. Now, Hull winds up in charge of Fort Detroit, because the city of Detroit and the Fort of Detroit are two different entities altogether. There's Americans and British living together in the city. So when General Brock gets there, he actually lets Hull take over Fort Detroit. So they get inside there, the fort, and they really take it over. Now, not long after this, now Tecumseh and Brock get along good. They've allowed Hull to go into Fort Detroit. Brock gets with Tecumseh and says, look, this guy is not going to come out and fight us, even though he's got us overpowered. We can trick him and make him think we have more people than we do. So they cut a hole in a line of trees to where they can see. And they do what we did partly in the Civil War. Tecumseh takes his Indians and starts marching them in a circle. He only has 1,000, but Hull's watching through a telescope. And by the end of the day, he thinks Tecumseh has 5,000 warriors there. So they go in and they approach him at the fort and say, look, Brock and Tecumseh literally ride up to the fort within rifle range. And Brock tells Tecumseh, if this ruse fails, if this doesn't work, there's no way we can take that fort, because we don't have enough artillery to take it. So let's go see if we can call his bluff and talk to him. So they're getting ready to put up a flag to talk, and lo and behold, a bed sheet comes up on the flagpole inside Fort Detroit. And Hull's men, he has Kentuckians, he has 2,200 men in and around that fort, and they're telling him they don't have that many. You have militia and backwoodsmen in that fort, and they're telling him there's no way there's 5,000 Indians out there. Let us take a party of at least 500 and go out and see what we can do. Let us go out and scout. He won't do it. He surrenders the fort. So he gives them Fort Detroit back. They parole them, in a sense. They split them up, and you have to sign a paper. It's like a gentleman's war in the sense. That you have to sign a piece of paper that if we let you go, we're going to pardon you or parole you, but you have to sign this piece of paper that says that you will never take up arms against the king again. So, this is what happens. Now, Detroit is back in the hands of the British. Brock leaves. Another general comes in with the name of Henry Proctor. And he does not get along with Tecumseh. And there's a place there called Frenchtown that the Americans have taken. The British and the Indians attack at night, and 400 Americans are killed and 500 wounded. They promised the prisoners and wounded that they would be protected, but 200 of them are slaughtered. Now, Tecumseh thinks that this is going to strike fear throughout all the Americans. And it says here that there were 1,000 British under Proctor, there's 1,000 Indians under Tecumseh. Tecumseh challenged William Henry Harrison, who they hate each other, at a fight to the death. And of course Harrison won't bait. And they're in a little fort. He even offers to take Tecumseh to the White House to meet George Washington. And of course he laughs this off. Now, Tecumseh challenged him to a fight, and of course he wouldn't take it. And Proctor tells him, this is the first time when Oliver Hazard Perry's name actually really pops up, that he tells Tecumseh, if we don't hold this area, there's a guy out there called Oliver Hazard Perry, And he has warships, and he's bringing supplies into these Americans. And if we don't stop him, he will load these warships with William Henry Harrison's men. They're going to sail up the Detroit River, and they're going to take this fort back, and they're going to push us into Canada. Now, Oliver Hazard Perry, they have a shipyard near Sandusky, Ohio, actually near Cleveland. And it was actually possible that he could transport the troops. But there's a little fort down near Sandusky. It has 170 defenders in it. But they can't take it. The British come in, and they have a little set of artillery. And again, William Henry Harrison comes into play here. And they shoot into the fort, thinking that they're going to break it down. But it's made out of, they have just put it up, it's made out of green wood, and it won't shatter. It won't break apart. So they're concentrating on one side of it here. And William Henry Harrison is smart enough, they have one cannon. He loads it with grape shot and moves it to the other side. And when they charge, there's a trench out there. And they're coming in with ladders. They bombarded him with artillery. And they're trying to hack through the walls of the fort. And he discharges that cannon that he's hit and kills over 100 of them in one blast. So that pretty much puts the quietness on that. Now, Proctor has hopped down to Tecumseh again. Tecumseh asks him, says, why are you standing with your hands tied? Well, he's standing there with his hands behind his back, and he jerks and looks at Tecumseh, and Tecumseh shakes his head. He says, we need to attack. This force isn't as big as we are. Well, now Proctor is like Hull. He doesn't want to attack. He gets cold feet, even though we're at war. And he says, let's wait. We have a commander on Lake Erie. We're low on supplies right now. Our food's low, our ammunition's low, and we're waiting on them to send him 60 seamen. He can't sail our fleet right now. But the Americans don't know this. So he says, let's wait. And again, Tecumseh is saying, my men can't wait. They don't want to wait. Indians want to fight. They're like the militia. But he says this Robert Barclay, who is lost an arm with Horatio Horton, he is a very seasoned sailor for the British. I mean, top of the line. So all of a sudden, Oliver Hazard Perry moves his ship to the western side of Lake Erie. They move out of Sandusky. They move out of the protection. They don't know that Barclay doesn't have the men. And what, as I mentioned to you all earlier, I did not realize it. This is where Perry County, Hazard, gets its name. And there's a big monument on Kelly Island. First time I went fishing up there, I told you all about this last week, but here was this monument. And I said, I asked the guys fishing with it, I said, what is that? He said, it's a monument. Oliver Hazard Perry. I said, Hazard? Perry County? He said, oh yeah. I said, well, what did he do? He said, he won the Battle of Lake Erie against the British. They had him outgunned and outmanned. Well, come to find out, a third of his, quote, sailors, who weren't sailors, were from Kentucky. They're sharpshooters. So when the British are trying to man their guns and their cannons, he has sharpshooters on his ship shooting the men down, so no one wants to go up and fire the cannons because you're going to die. I mean, you can't make this up. So Barclay would attack and destroy the Americans, cutting off their supplies and their means of crossing Erie to attack all of them. He's out circling on Lake Erie, taunting Barclay to come out. Well, finally he does. He attacked with hope and determination because that's all he had. He's waiting on his seamen to come in. They send him 60 men for five ships. So it says here that Barclay sailed with sails billowed. He had the Chippewa, a 70-ton schooner, which means they can carry 70 tons. The Detroit, which could carry 490 tons. The General Hunter, 180 tons. The Queen Charlotte, 400 tons. The Lady Provost, 230 tons. And Little Belt, a schooner of 90 tons. He was handily defeated by the Kentucky Marksmen. It says this is the saying, we have met the enemy and they are ours. He captured all their ships. So now what can he do? He can load these troops up with William Henry Harrison, take them up the Detroit River to Detroit. Not good news for Proctor and the bridge. And another saying, don't give up the ship. Proctor would not tell Tecumseh that this had happened. He goes for almost 5 days, and finally, there's an Indian agent coming up there. He's avoiding Tecumseh. Tecumseh wants to kill him. He wants to kill Proctor. And Proctor knows this. And finally, Matthew Elliott, who's an Indian agent, goes to Proctor and says, look, if you don't tell this man what's happened and tell him the truth, he's going to kill you. Because no one knows. They can hear the sound of the battle on Lake Erie, but no, you can't see. No one knows what happened. They can see the smoke and hear the cannons going off. And finally, he tells him, Barclay lost. We don't have a fleet on Lake Erie anymore. Which means your nemesis, William Henry Harrison, is on his way here. And they would always throw in with the mounted Kentuckians. You know, and this is how that Kentucky, and we're going to do some stats here at the end of this tonight, how much Kentucky played a face in this. Now, when Tecumseh goes in, Proctor's packing up. He asks, where are you going? You're mad out on Lake Erie. You know, we're supposed to be loading ships and going down the other way. And Proctor says, no, we can't do this. We've got to get away from Detroit. We're going to go up on the River Thames, which is we call it, we would pronounce it the Thames if it were here in America, T-H-A-M-E-S. It runs into right below Lake St. Clair. Lake St. Clair is between Michigan and Erie, which was named after General St. Clair. But Proctor is a strategist, and he kind of piques Tecumseh's interest here. He says, look, I have picked out a spot. He lays out a map that's as detailed as any map Tecumseh's ever seen. It says, we will go here. Let's go up. The river's to the left. We have a swamp to the right. We can build a line and hold it here. And Tecumseh says, okay, let's go. Because he says, Harrison is coming with his mounted Kentuckians, 4,000 of them. Tecumseh states to him, I am in the company of cowards who fear the very wind that brings the scent of an enemy. So Tecumseh is very pleased with his new general, Proctor. So they go 60 miles east to the Thames River, and they set up where Perry's ships cannot sail. So they go far enough up the river Thames to where they'll at least, because these ships have artillery on, and they know that. So, September the 8th, 1813, Tecumseh watches as Perry's American fleet sails into view. Is 8,000 men in this Western Army of the United States of America. And that sounds good because we, from 1791 to 1813, we're doing pretty good. We aren't doing bad. Now, when the British start to retreat, they destroy everything. They burn every building. They destroy ammunition. They destroy food. They're leaving nothing. A tactic that we used, if you remember in World War II, we had to burn up a fuel depot to keep the Germans from getting it. So this is nothing, that wasn't anything new in war. Now, before this battle, Tecumseh sitting around with his chiefs, and he tells them, tomorrow I die. He's back. And they had the same reaction that you and I would probably have. I said, you don't go. You can't go. We can't lose you. He says, no, I'm a warrior. I am a Shawnee warrior. And tomorrow, I'm going to die. And I will not blame you if you get up and leave tonight. You may do that. But if you want to stay and fight, I will lead you tomorrow. And they stay. Now, he gets up. Of course, he has on a silver medal that was given to him by the King of England. He has a headdress on. He has silver ornaments on. And he takes everything off with his breechcloth. He doesn't want anything. He doesn't want to be recognized as a chief. Just like in Vietnam, we wouldn't salute. The guys in the field would not salute an officer to keep us, because then you knew it was an officer, a sniper's going to pick you up. Now he has a brother-in-law named Wazzy Goldman, standing firm, who was married to Tecumseh's sister. And he tells him, he says, tomorrow, he's his bodyguard. Tecumseh has like 5 bodyguards, and they literally will be just, they're like our Secret Service agents. They will take a shot for the president. You know, Tecumseh got wounded in the thigh, and one of his bodyguards went into deep depression because he didn't get there in time to jump in front of him. But he tells Wazzy Goba, he says, if you stay close to me tomorrow, he takes the ramrod out of a musket and says, if you will get to me and tap me 4 times, I'll come back to life. Now, this is very, very skeptical. But this can't happen because Wazzy Goba gets killed early in this battle. So Tecumseh goes into this battle with only a war club. Now, here's where a man by the name of William Whitley, there's a William Whitley house down near Stanford. He's 64 years old, and I can't imagine this. But when I looked at the roles for this war, he's 64 years old. He gets on a horse down in Stanford, Kentucky, and rides to this battle. He is battle seasoned. The oldest one in this battle was 90. There was a 90-year-old from Kentucky that gets on a horse and rides all the way to Canada to fight. I mean, that's why we're the fighting Kentuckians. They were there as young as 14. We had Kentuckians from 14 to 90 fighting in this war. But what's unusual, this is where William Whitley comes in. He loads his gun with 2 balls. Very unusual. It's something he's always done. And you're going to see why this is important. But what we talked about last week, and I meant to bring this up earlier, if you remember, when Tecumseh's brother, the triplets, were born, what did the medicine man want to do? Remember, he wanted to put them to death because he said 1 or all 3 of these will bring dishonor to this tribe. And that was the prophet that told this. So he did bring dishonor, and he caused the Indian nation to fall. So that old medicine man was right. The battle had begun. William Henry Harrison has 3,000 men. 1,000 of them are mounted Kentuckians. Tecumseh took only a war club that his brother had given him. Now, a gray-haired man riding a white horse, who is William Henry Harrison, charges into view. The Indians thought him to be an officer and fired a number of shots, and they brought him down. Now, there was a young man with the name of David King. He was a private. And in the den of this battle, if you remember when we started this, when you load your musket, powder, patch, or ball, or it won't work at all. He's a young man in his 20s. And in the den of this battle, He does the oops. He puts a ball down in his musket without powder. And he looks up for knowing that there's no way to retrieve this, but he looks out there by this gray-haired man, this old man that's laying there, and his weapon's laying there, cocked. So he dashes out, grabs William Whitley's rifle. One of his fellow soldiers hollers at him, "Private King," screams at him, and he turns, and there's an Indian there, and he turns and shoots. He's in the breast. It's Tecumseh. So Tecumseh's dead. Wazigoba's dead. So there's no one to get to him. Now, here's where the big controversy comes in. One story says that I read, and I believe this to be true, that Simon Kenton was there. And they were hunting for Tecumseh's body because they were going to skin him and make razor stripes. Now, when you really get to reading part of this, both sides they mutilated the dead. Tecumseh did not believe in mutilation or torture. And he changed a lot of hearts in the Shawnees, especially about the torture. But they wanted trophies. They wanted a lock of his hair. They wanted to scalp him. They wanted to skin him. So they start going through and hunting for him. And this one story, which I believe says that Kenton rolled him over and saw that it was Tecumseh and says, "No, that's not him. This is an ordinary warrior." But they do find one that they think is Tecumseh, and they skin him. They cut his fingers off, they skin him. No one knows where Tecumseh's buried. And that night, his warriors crept in, found his body, and took him. They wound up taking him all the way to Oklahoma. Because before we ever started this lesson, and I didn't mention it, there is such a tribe of Shawnees called the Absentee Shawnees. They live in Oklahoma today. Early on, when Boone and Kenton destroyed the first Chillicothe, they knew what was coming. They split then in the late 1700s, and they went west and settled in Oklahoma. They still go by the Absentee Shawnees. Now, the Battle of Thames is over. Tecumseh's dead. So what else is there to do? The war treaty. Now this is in October of 1813. So where are we headed now? New Orleans. We have run the British out of all of America. We've pushed them so they hang around and make sure that the British are gone. So now it's time to go to New Orleans. Now, how do we get to New Orleans? Well, we go down. Who do you remember who's in New Orleans? Who's going to lead the battle? Andrew Jackson. You want to remember his nickname? This is the teacher coming out. Old Hickory. Well, how did the British get to New Orleans? This is a different group of British altogether. What has just happened? Who met their fate at Waterloo? Napoleon. The troops that defeated Napoleon, over 3,000 of them. Now these are hardcore, seasoned soldiers. They just defeated Napoleon at Waterloo. And they tell them, we've got another war going on. We're back at war with the Americans. And they got an army in New Orleans. So we're going to sail up the Mississippi River as far as we can get. We're going to land at New Orleans. We're going up the Mississippi River, and we're going to take care of these country bumpkins. Because we hear there's a bunch of them, the fighting Kentuckians, the brown shirts, the dirty shirts, country bumpkins. We're going to go take care of them. Now, do you remember the Johnny Horton song? 1814, we took a little trip along with Colonel Jackson, down the mighty Mississippi. Took a little bacon, took a little beans. We met the bloody British in a town in New Orleans. Well, Jackson had 4,500 men. But there was a man in there with the name, I'll go ahead and tell you his name, Ephraim Bragg. Means nothing right now. He was in General Andrew Jackson's 4,500 hodgepodge, ragtag men. They were from Louisiana, Tennessee, and the Kentucky militia. Frontiersmen, regular soldiers, sailors and Marines, freed African Americans, Native Americans, local volunteers, inmates from the city jail, and even a band of pirates. So they didn't care. If you wanted to fight, get in here. Now, they're not actually in New Orleans. They're up the river in a place called Chalmette. I played basketball with the guys there. So I got to go to this place too. There's a park there. And there was a canal there called the Rodriguez Canal. And they actually extended it a little bit. It was about 15 feet wide and 8 foot deep. And they started a breastwork. They had the Mississippi River, and after facing down the Mississippi, like we were, the Mississippi River's on your right. There's a swamp on the left. You have nowhere to run. You can't be outflanked. They put up a barrier that's 3,000 feet long, made out of cotton bales, sugar, barrels of sugar, anything, wagons. Now this would stretch from down here at Main Street all the way up to the old Mexican restaurant at Oak Street. This is how long their battle fortifications are. And they're standing waiting on the bridge. The Americans at Chalmette, Jackson and his men dug in behind the Rodriguez Canal. The Americans called this position Line Jackson. They were hastily constructed of dirt, barrels of sugar, bales of cotton, timber with openings. Now, we had artillery. We had cannons there. Undaunted, the British, 5,000 strong, charged with bayonets fixed. The Americans, whom the redcoats scorned as dirty shirts, refused to budge. They aimed a deadly storm of rifle, musket, and cannon fire at the attackers. So they backed up. Now, I'm going to read to you. There was a British officer that lived. And this is actually from his journal. Now, Old Hickory, this is where the saying, what did he tell them? Don't shoot until you see the whites of their eyes. Let them get up here. Well, there is a such thing as a gentleman's war, but the Kentuckians aren't gentlemen. You know, don't want to be gentlemen. They come there to do one thing, that's kill British. Now, the officers are on horseback. And it's not really, but I was fair in love at war. And Old Hickory kind of said, you know, we don't need to really be picking their officers off. But this Ephraim Bragg, he stands up, he gets up, he stands up. He's looking out on the ramparts. Here's what this British officer wrote, the one that lead. He said, we marched in solid columns in a direct line upon the American defenses. What attracted our attention most was the figure of a tall man standing on the breastworks, dressed in linsey woolsey, with buckskin leggings, and a broad-brimmed hat that fell around his face, almost concealing his features. He was standing in one of those picturesque, graceful attitudes peculiar to those natural men dwelling in the forest. The body rested on his left leg and swayed with a curved line upwards, the right arm extended, the hand grasping the rifle near the muzzle, the butt of which rested near the toe of his right foot. With his left hand, he raised the rim of his hat from his eyes and seemed gazing intently on our advancing column. The cannon of the enemy had opened up on us and tore through our ranks with dreadful slaughter, but we continued to advance, unwavering and cool, as if nothing threatened our program. The roar of the cannon had no effect upon the figure before us. He seemed fixed, motionless as a statue. At last he moved. He threw back his hat rim over the crown with his left hand, raised his rifle, and took aim at our group. At whom had he leveled his piece? Because the distance was so great that we looked at each other and smiled. We saw the rifle flash and very rightly conjectured that his aim was in the direction of our party. My right-hand companion, as noble as a fellow as ever rode at the head of a regiment, fell from his saddle. The hunter paused a few moments without moving the gun from his shoulder. Then he reloaded and resumed his former attitude. But he did not reload. What the British don't know is that there's two guys standing behind him. When he shoots, they've already got he's got two men loaded. As soon as he shoots, they're passing him up. Of course, they can't see this from a distance. But he's got two men back loading. There's 3 Kentucky rifles that Ephraim Brank's using right now. Throwing the hat rim over his eyes and again holding it up with his left hand, he fixed his piercing gaze upon us, as if hunting out another victim. Once more the hat rim was thrown back and the gun raised to his shoulder. This time, we did not smile, but cast our glances at each other to see which one of us must die. When again the rifle flashed, another of our party dropped to the earth. And he's picking off the officers. Very demoralizing. There was something most awful in this marching to certain death. Now these are men who just defeated Napoleon. The cannon and the thousands of musket balls played upon their ranks we cared not for there was a chance of escaping them. Now in researching this, I went and talked to 3 combat veterans. Men that have fought in several wars. And I said, why is this? Why does this cannon not bother them and the random shots? And he said, well, it's just like when you're being bored, or you're in a firefight, people are shooting all around you. You don't think about death at the time. But when you know there's a sniper up there, and he's got his crosshairs on someone, somebody's going to die. That takes the chance. It's like rolling dice. You know if this man's going to get you in his sights, you're going to die. The cannon is just, it's a chance. It's an arbitrary thing. Most of us had walked as coolly upon batteries more destructive without quailing. But to know that every time that the rifle was leveled toward us, and its bullet sprang from the barrel, one of us must surely fall. To see it rest, motionless as if poised on a rack, and know when the hammer came down that the messenger of death drove unerringly to its goal. To know this and still march on was awful. I could see nothing but the tall figure standing on the breastworks. He seemed to grow phantom-like, higher and higher, assuming through the smoke the supernatural appearance of some great spirit of death. Again did he reload and discharge his rifle with the same unfailing aim and the same unfailing result. And it was indescribable pleasure that I beheld as we marched toward the American lines, the sulphurous clouds gathering around us and shutting that spectre hunter from our gaze. He was glad to be engulfed in a billow of smoke, because he knew the guy up on that breastwork couldn't see him. We lost the battle. And to my mind, that Kentucky rifleman contributed more to our defeat than anything else. For which he remained to our side, our attention was drawn from our duties. And when at last we became enshrouded in smoke, the work was completed, we were in utter confusion and unable in the extremity to restore order sufficient to make any successful attack. The battle was lost. Ephraim Bragg, there is a statue, Muhlenberg County, in Greenville, on the courthouse lawn, of him with his hat and his rifle that he's pointing toward New Orleans. It's worth, it hasn't been up very long, but I'm gonna go see it this summer. I haven't got to see that. In the footnotes, it says here, as I told you, that Bragg did not reload his rifle himself, but 5 rockets that were reloaded and handed up. Of course, we know that he did not single-handedly do this, but it demoralized him. And if you go back and listen to the song, it says was it that we fired our cannon till the barrel melted down, so we grabbed an alligator and we fought another round. We filled his head with cannonballs and powdered his behind, and when we touched the powder off, the gator lost his mind. And it says that then the British turned, they ran through the brambles, and they ran through the bushes. They ran so fast that the hounds couldn't catch them. Down through the brambles and the brushes where a rabbit couldn't go, to the Gulf of Mexico. So we ran them back, literally to their ships. And here are some afternotes that I have taken. It says, after the Battle of the Thames was over, 600 British officers and soldiers were brought to Frankfort, Kentucky, and put in the state penitentiary. So we played a whole lot in this role. 1/4 of Commodore Perry's men were from Kentucky. During the war, Columbus, Kentucky, after they burnt the Capitol in D.C., Columbus, Kentucky was actually looked at as maybe becoming the capital of the United States. That's something I learned not knowing this. On January the 4th, 1815, 2,500 Kentucky militias landed in New Orleans, which was 1/4 of Jackson's force. And then, of course, there was Ephraim Bragg from Greenville in Muhlenberg County. Kentucky furnished, and this is mind-boggling, people, 25,708 regular militia and volunteers for the War of 1812. 4 of 6 of the eligible males in the state of Kentucky went to war. A half of them killed in the War of 1812 were from Kentucky. British losses at New Orleans, 2,600 killed or wounded, and only 7 Americans in the Battle of New Orleans. Yeah. There was a British commander that Bragg, we think Bragg killed him. His name was Sir Edward Packenham. His wife was actually in New Orleans, because they had a big party planned. For as soon as they went in and kicked ass and took names and run the dirty church and that ragamuffin army off, he was killed. They put him in a barrel of rum, pickled him in a barrel of rum, and shipped him back to London for proper burial. So that's the note that it's just going to, they wrote a good barrel of rum. So I thank you for coming to this. I have up here all the books that I've used for research. I have also the War of 1812 for Kentuckians, if anyone wants to look at this. And there is the muster rolls for Estill County in the War of 1812, and it's almost illegible because it is the actual muster rolls, and there was actually 76 people from Estill County. We hadn't been in county very long. But you have to remember, at that time, we were what's now Estill, Lee, Jackson, Owsley, and Breathitt. We were that big of an area. And this is a copy. And I want to thank the library for, they went through and got these books for me, David did, and made this a lot easier on me. I didn't have to go up there. So if you all want to come up and look at this, there's even a way on here to find your ancestors in the War of 1812 if you want to. Here are the notes of Kentucky veterans, and these are I'm going to take these back to the Historical Society. Kentucky pension rolls of 1835. So, and these are valuable records for people who do ancestry and so forth. And here is a call to arms, a collection of fascinating stories, events, personalities, and facts about, and it had a lot about the War of 1812. So if you all want to come up and.
I have a question.
Yes.
Of the triplets, was Tecumseh one of the triplets?
No.
No?
No, and I was, they were born last. And again, the medicine man wanted to kill them. An Indian did not name, the Shawnees, you did not get a name until you were 10 days old. They want to see if you're going to live. Some Indian tribes, you didn't get a name until you were 30 days old. To see, to make sure you were going to live. But the one-eyed prophet, he got his eye put out in a, quote, hunting accident, but he was not a nice person. He was mean, he was cruel. His brother got killed at Fallen Timbers. One of the triplets did. And I wondered how that the other one died. And the one-eyed prophet, Loala Sika, one who makes a loud noise, and he could pass gas at will. He was just, he was awful. But he told the other triplet, they hated honeybees in the sense. They called them the stinging flies, because the Indians didn't have honey. The bee wasn't here. You think about this. The Indians did not have wheat. The Europeans did not have corn. So the Europeans brought the honeybee over here. The Indians called them the stinging flies, and they hated them because when they were out in the woods and they found a bee tree, they knew the white man was 6 months behind. They're coming to take our land. But now they liked the honey. They found the prophet, Loala Sika, found a honey tree and got the other triplet, told him, said, go up and get me the honey out. And he got up there and got to digging in that honey tree, and the bees started stinging. And he said, I can't do this, and the bees are stinging me. He said, I'll put a spell on them. He said, they'll sting you, but it won't hurt you. They stung him to death. He stood there and let his little brother get stung to death by bees for honey. That's, so he was not a nice person. Any more questions or comments? I appreciate you all coming, and I appreciate the people online, and thank you for asking me, and I'll plug Mr. Arthur's program next week. He's going to do the history of coal and oil in Estill County. And we do have a little bit of coal. And I'm not going to steal any of his thunder because I don't know that much about it. But he'll do a good job on that. Nick and I talked together for years and did a lot of unconventional things in the classroom. But he knows his stuff when it comes to oil. And he'll have some statistics. They're still pumping oil like crazy in Estill County. Because the last person I talked with, oil has to be, $54 a barrel to break even. So, oil went down a little bit, but gas went up because of the fire in the refinery and whatever, just some reason. But again, thank you all for coming through.